Why did the sky go silent that day? Why did every control die, all at once? The aircraft lurched, a shudder that felt alive. 35,000 feet over Europe. A scream from the cockpit. Then darkness. The captain's voice cut through the intercom, panic, raw and breaking. We've lost control, all systems offline. Inside the cabin, screens flickered. Symbols replaced scenery. Blinding red words, system locked. Passengers gasped. A flight attendant dropped her tray. Phones lit up. A child started crying. And somewhere in seat 14A, a 17-year-old girl opened her laptop. No one noticed her at first. No one ever really did. Elena Novak. Thin, quiet. Headphones always on. The kind of girl who spoke to machines more easily than to people. But that day, the machines were listening. She typed fast, fingers trembling but sure. "What are you doing?" a flight attendant shouted. Elena didn't look up, sending a distress signal. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. She entered a line of code she'd memorized years ago, a code that shouldn't exist anymore. Falcon 6 override/activate. Thousands of miles away, inside NATO radar command, a console blinked. An officer leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Impossible, that's a Falcon 6 signal. That phrase, Falcon 6, hadn't appeared in 5 years. It belonged to a man who died keeping it secret. Major Mark Novak. Cyber defense architect. Hero. Elena's father. She'd been flying to London that morning, carrying a backpack, a laptop, and a sticker that read Falcon 6, the same emblem her father once wore on his flight jacket. She was supposed to be heading for a programming competition. Not a battlefield. 5 years earlier, she'd watched her father leave for work and never come home. A data center accident, they called it. Explosion. Equipment malfunction. But Elena never believed it. He taught her too well. That systems don't simply fail, they're made to fail. By someone. So she studied. She memorized. Every code. Every system he'd ever built. Every habit he'd left behind. Her mother called it obsession. Elena called it keeping him alive. Now, midair, surrounded by chaos, she realized something her father had warned about in late-night conversations she barely understood at the time. If the sky ever goes silent, kiddo, listen closely. It's still talking, you just have to know the language. The plane groaned as if alive, tilting, gasping, trembling. The pilots fought controls that refused to obey. The autopilot engaged itself. Every button blinked wrong. The captain cursed, sweat dripping down his temple. He pulled levers that didn't respond. The co-pilot muttered under his breath, a prayer or a surrender. Then a quiet voice behind the locked cockpit door. "I can help." They didn't open it. Not yet. Inside, Elena knelt by the service panel, prying it open with a cable she'd brought for debugging her competition hardware. Her laptop connected, a small hum, like a heart restarting. Lines of corrupted code filled the screen like static, like a scream written in language only she understood. Malware. Sophisticated. Hidden deep inside the aircraft's control system. She recognized the pattern. She'd seen it in fragments of her father's old files. In notes she wasn't supposed to read. In code she wasn't supposed to know. And the realization hit her like ice. The thing taking over this plane was built from her father's work. He tried to protect the skis. Someone had stolen his code, twisted it into a weapon. The same weapon that killed him. She stared at the endless stream of data. For a moment, grief almost broke her concentration. Then she whispered, not a prayer but a promise. "Not again." Outside the cockpit door, the captain's voice broke through. "Who are you?" "Elena Novik," she answered. "My father wrote the Falcon 6 protocol. I can restore your systems if you let me try." The door opened with a click that sounded like surrender. She stepped inside. Two men, exhausted, terrified, defeated. One teenager, pale, trembling, determined. The captain gestured helplessly at the dead controls. "You think that laptop going to save us?" She met his eyes. "It's not the laptop, it's what's inside it." She typed faster, her hands moving like they remembered every keystroke her father had ever shown her. F6 echo, override / vector recall. Her screen flickered, then one instrument came alive. Just one. Enough. NATO radar picked up the signal again, Falcon 6 active. Colonel Briggs, duty officer on watch, froze. He'd served with Mark Novik once, years ago. He knew that code. He'd buried the man who created it. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Novik's dead." But the signal didn't care about grief. It pulsed, urgent, bright, alive. Falcon 6 was back. Inside the cockpit, the air felt charged, electric with fear and hope. Elena's screen displayed an unfamiliar signature. A countdown. 43 minutes until execution sequence. She didn't know what the command would do. She didn't need to. Whatever it was, it would kill everyone aboard. The co-pilot's voice cracked. "Can you stop it?" Elena bit her lip hard enough to draw blood. "I can try, but I need access full system layer." The captain hesitated. This was a teenager. A passenger. But she spoke with a confidence he'd lost an hour ago. He gave a single nod. Her father had once said, "Every security system is a conversation between trust and doubt." Right now the captain chose trust. She entered another sequence. Eco F6 defense lockdown. The screen paused, requesting voice authorization. Her pulse spiked. That file, the one she'd carried for years, labeled "Dad, final message." She clicked play. His voice, static soft, low, familiar, filled the cockpit. "Happy birthday, my Falcon 6. It wasn't a greeting anymore. It was a key. System matched voice print. Authorization granted. And for the first time since the blackout, one control light turned green. Then another. Then 10. Elena exhaled shakily. The plane was listening to her now. At NATO command, alarms went off. Radar pings confirmed the impossible. The Falcon 6 signal wasn't ground-based. It was airborne, transmitting from a civilian flight over the North Sea. Colonel Briggs leaned over the map. His voice steady, but his hands weren't. "Send F-22s, find that plane, escort it, protect it." No one questioned the order. You didn't, not when ghosts of dead heroes came back speaking through code. Two Raptors streaked across the sky, contrails cutting silver paths through dawn. Their pilots heard the call sign echo through encrypted channels. Falcon 6 active. Civilian craft, possible hostile hijack. Orders, protect at all costs. They didn't understand. But they obeyed. In the cockpit, Elena's concentration narrowed. The virus fought back, rewriting code, shifting patterns, mocking her attempts to contain it. She recognized the signature embedded deep in its logic. She whispered the name under her breath, Reeves. Anton Reeves. Her father's former colleague. The man present the night of the explosion. The one who disappeared after the inquiry. So this was his revenge. A ghost war fought not with guns but code. And the daughter was the last line of defense. Her fingers blurred across keys. Each keystroke a heartbeat. Each heartbeat a countdown. 30 minutes. 29. 28. The captain stared at her like she wasn't human, like she was something the plane had summoned to save itself. "Who taught you this?" "My father," she said softly. "He used to say the sky doesn't forgive mistakes, but it remembers who tries to fix them." Outside, the horizon burned orange with sunrise. The F-22s appeared like guardian silhouettes beside the civilian jet, silent wings shimmering through morning haze. Passengers saw them through windows and gasped. Hope took shape in titanium and vapor. Inside the NATO command room, voices overlapped, coordinates shouted, authorizations confirmed. Someone finally asked the question, hanging over every console. "Who's controlling that plane?" Briggs answered quietly. "Not whose daughter." In the cockpit, the countdown hit 15 minutes. Elena's hands were numb. Her vision blurred. She hadn't blinked in minutes. Her father's code, her code now, was fighting back. She activated traceback protocol, revering the signal toward its origin. On her screen, a location blinked into existence, an abandoned server hub outside Oslo. She transmitted it directly to NATO command. Back on the ground, agents moved. Coordinates confirmed. Task forces dispatched. For the first time, Reeves was exposed. 10 minutes. Elena typed the last override. Falcon 6/system control transfer. The malware screamed digital static flooding the cabin speakers, then fell silent. The cockpit lights returned. Every panel glowed green. The plane obeyed its pilots again. The captain's breath broke on a half-laugh, half-sob. "You did it, you actually did it." Elena leaned back, exhausted. Her father's voice still echoing in her mind. "Happy birthday, my Falcon 6. "No," she whispered, "he did." Below, radar operators watched as the blip labeled Flight 982 steadied its course, flanked by 2 F-22s. Briggs lifted his headset, voice low but certain. "Copy that, Falcon 6. Welcome home." The sky, once silent, was speaking again. And the world was finally listening. Why did silence feel louder after survival? The engines hummed again, steady now, alive, obedient, but the cabin stayed quiet. No cheers, no applause, just the stunned hush of 212 people realizing they'd been seconds from nothing. Elena sat in the jump seat beside the captain. Her hands still shook. Her laptop's fan whispered like a fatting heartbeat. Outside the window, 2 F-22s flew close enough for her to see sunlight flash off their canopies. Guardians made of steel. The captain finally exhaled. "Falcon 6, he said softly, almost reverent. "Whoever your father was, he built a miracle." She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, flat, endless, forgiving. She couldn't quite believe the world was still there. In NATO command, Colonel Briggs leaned over a glowing radar map. Operators whispered around him, disbelief turning slowly into awe. The Falcon 6 signal still pulsed across encrypted channels, proof that something thought dead was alive again. "Patch me through," Briggs ordered. The comm tech hesitated. "Sir, it's a civilian flight." "Patch me through." Static. Then a voice, young, unsteady but composed. "This is Elena Novak, Flight 982, systems restored, malware neutralized." Briggs swallowed hard. "Elena, Mark Novik's daughter." "Yes, sir." A pause, then his voice broke. "He saved my life once. Looks like you just returned the favor." He could have said more, protocols, questions, congratulations, but something in her tone stopped him. The exhaustion, the grief disguised as focus. She didn't need applause, she needed rest. "Maintain course," Briggs said gently. "You're under escort, will bring you home." The world learned of it before the plane even landed. Someone's live stream had survived the blackout, Images of a teenage girl in the cockpit, typing furiously as warning lights flashed red. By the time Flight 982 touched down at RAF Lakenheath, the video had millions of views. Girl saves plane using dead soldier's secret code. It sounded impossible. That was why people believed it. But Elena wasn't thinking about headlines. She was thinking about her mother. When the wheels met runway, she expected applause. Instead, passengers sat frozen, as if afraid to break the spell that kept them alive. Then one by one, they began to cry. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that said we're still here. Elena powered down the laptop. For the first time since takeoff, she allowed herself to feel small. 17, tired, scared. And missing her father so much it hurt to breathe. The captain touched her shoulder. You ever need a reference for flight school, kid, you've got one. She tried to smile, failed halfway. Outside, soldiers surrounded the plane, security first, gratitude second. Briggs was already on site when Elena stepped onto the tarmac. He looked older than she'd imagined. Gray hair, uniform creased from too many long nights. He saluted. She didn't know whether to salute back. He lowered his hand and said quietly, "Your father would have been proud, Falcon 6. She almost laughed. Tell me I broke protocol. He'd also tell you that you followed the only one that mattered, protect lives. He handed her a sealed tablet. Evidence from your transmission, you traced the attacker. She hesitated before taking it. On the screen, coordinates, timestamps, a digital fingerprint. Anton Reeves. The name she'd whispered to herself mid-flight, now displayed in bold black letters. Briggs watched her expression harden. You knew him. He killed my father. Then we'll make sure the world knows that too. Hours later, while intelligence teams raided a server hub outside Oslo, Elena sat in a quiet base office drinking water that tasted of metal. Every sound, phones, boots, distant jets, felt too loud after the near silence of death. Briggs entered with a folder. He didn't sit right away. You traced him perfectly. Reeves was there the night of the explosion. Your father wasn't wrong. She nodded, numb. I thought I was crazy for years. Everyone said it was grief. Grief doesn't write flawless code, he said softly. Grief doesn't save 200 lives. He placed the folder in front of her. Inside, declassified photos, reports, a medal citation never delivered. Major Mark Novick, killed in action protecting classified research from hostile compromise. The line she'd waited 5 years to read. Her throat tightened. They called it an accident. They had to, Briggs said. Until today, no one could prove otherwise. A pause. You just did. Night fell. Through the office window, she saw the Falcon 6 insignia projected on a hangar wall, temporary, improvised, beautiful. Her father's emblem reborn. Her mother arrived near midnight, escorted by military transport. Elena met her halfway across the runway. They didn't speak at first, just held on, shaking, both remembering the same explosion, the same funeral, the same silence that had followed. Finally, her mother whispered, "You heard him, didn't you?" Elena nodded against her shoulder. Yes, and this time the world heard him too. Reeves was captured before dawn, cornered by his own signal trail, trying to erase evidence that couldn't be erased. The irony was brutal, a man undone by the very system he'd corrupted. Briggs watched the feed in the command center, jaw set. Novick built a shield, he muttered. Reeves turned it into a knife, and now the daughter turned it back into a shield. Justice wasn't loud that morning. It arrived in handcuffs and silence. By the next day, the world had chosen its symbol. A photo of Elena stepping off the aircraft, hair wind-tossed, laptop clutched to her chest, flanked by two F-22s. The caption read, "Falcon 6 lives." But Elena felt the cost more than the fame. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the red words flashing across cockpit glass. System locked. Every time she opened them, she saw her father's face superimposed over her reflection. Briggs visited her quarters before sunrise. "You're not a soldier, Elena. You don't have to stay involved." She looked up, eyes hollow but steady. "I already am. I finished his mission. I'm not stopping now." He studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You sound just like him." The investigation widened fast. Evidence from Reeves's servers showed years of stolen research sold to terrorist groups. Falcon 6 had been their key, NATO's unbreakable code turned inside out, until its rightful owner reclaimed it. When the report reached headquarters, the director wrote one line on the cover page: "Reinstate Falcon 6 as active defense protocol. Acknowledge Major Novik as architect. Recognize civilian operative Elena Novik for field application." Briggs delivered the news personally. Elena just stared at the paper. "Field application," she repeated. "Means you didn't just use the system," Briggs said. "You proved it works." Reporters crowded outside the base gates by afternoon. She avoided them all. Public stories could wait. Private ones couldn't. She walked alone to the memorial wall, rows of names engraved in steel. Her father's plaque sat near the bottom: Major Mark Novik, integrity through code. Someone had left a fresh flower. She knew who. Briggs, probably. She placed her hand on the cold metal. "They know now," she whispered. "They finally know." Wind carried the hum of jets overhead, the Raptors taking off again, training, guarding the same sky her father once promised her was safe. She closed her eyes, hearing his voice blend with theirs. "If the sky ever goes silent, listen." That evening NATO held a closed-door ceremony. No cameras, no speeches for headlines. Just soldiers, engineers, and one teenager standing among them. Briggs stepped to the front. "Major Mark Novik built the Falcon 6 defense to protect us from invisible enemies. He died before he could prove it worked. Tonight, his daughter did exactly that." He handed Elena a small case. Inside, her father's service insignia, cleaned and restored. She traced its edges, the metal warm from his hand. "He used to say the sky doesn't belong to anyone," she murmured. "He was wrong," Briggs said. "Tonight it belongs to you." Later, alone, she opened her laptop one last time before sleep. Lines of code filled the screen, white on black, alive with motion. She scrolled to the bottom and typed quietly. She hit save. For a moment, the cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Then she closed the lid and finally slept. Outside, the night sky stretched endless and calm. Two Raptors streaked across it, their contrails crossing like silver signatures. If anyone on the ground had looked up, they might have sworn they saw letters forming in vapor. F6. Some victories don't sound like explosions. They sound like engines returning to idle. Like breathing after panic. Like a daughter whispering, "Thank you," into a quiet sky. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. They said heroes should smile for the cameras. Elena couldn't. Every lens felt like a weapon. Every flash like an explosion replayed. Reporters shouted questions she couldn't answer. Were you scared? How did you hack a plane? Are you joining the military? She wanted to tell them none of it felt like heroism. That it felt like surviving inside a scream. But she just said the only honest thing she could. I did what my father taught me to do. Listen when everyone else stops listening. They turned it into a headline anyway. In the quiet after interviews, she sat on her bunk at Lakenheath Base, staring at her father's insignia resting in her palm. The edges dug into her skin, sharp, real grounding. Outside, jets thundered down the runway, engines shaking the thin glass. She whispered to herself, "You'd hate this attention, wouldn't you, Dad?" He would've. He'd believed real service was invisible, that the best defenders were ghosts in the code. She wasn't a ghost. She was a story now. And stories didn't get to disappear. The official inquiry started 3 days later. A long table. A dozen men and women in uniforms. Screens filled with data, charts, timelines. Briggs sat beside her, his voice low. They just want details, facts, not emotions. But the facts were emotional. Every line of stolen code, every timestamp of Reeves' betrayal. It was all her father's handwriting rewritten in malice. A general leaned forward. "Miss Novak, when you initiated Falcon 6 override, were you aware that this was a classified NATO defense system?" "Yes, sir." "And how did you acquire that knowledge?" "He taught me," she said quietly, "before he died." Silence spread across the room, uncomfortable, heavy. Another officer cleared his throat. "Major Novik's project was terminated after his death. You understand the implications of reactivating a canceled protocol." Elena met his gaze. "If I hadn't, 212 people would be dead, including you maybe." Briggs fought a smile, hiding pride behind his hand. The general nodded slowly. "Understood." That night, Briggs found her sitting alone, near the memorial wall again. Rain traced thin rivers down the engraved steel. "They're going to declassify the file," he said. "My father." "Yours too, official recognition. You'll be written into the record as Falcon 6 operative." She looked up, unsure whether to feel honored or exposed. "That means the world will know everything." "It already does, kid. Better they know the truth." He hesitated before leaving. "By the way, Reeves pleaded guilty. Said he never expected you to understand the system. Said he underestimated what a daughter remembers." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "He underestimated what love remembers." The next morning, the story broke everywhere. Teen cyberhero saves hundreds using father's secret military code. Her face was everywhere. Newspapers, talk shows, even classrooms. Kids started calling themselves Falcons. Her inbox overflowed with messages from strangers, thank yous, job offers, marriage proposals, nonsense. Her mother watched it all unfold with quiet worry. She could see it, the exhaustion behind Elena's polite smiles, the flicker of unease every time her name trended online. "You don't have to be their symbol," her mother said. "I'm not trying to be," Elena whispered. "I'm just trying to breathe." The breathing got harder. Every night she replayed the cockpit, the red lights, the screaming, the cold certainty that they would die. She'd wake up gasping, reaching for her laptop like it was a weapon. Briggs noticed. He brought coffee one afternoon, found her staring blankly at a code window, not typing, just watching the cursor blink. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "You finished your father's work. What about your own?" She frowned. "I don't even know who I am without his mission." "Then maybe it's time to find out," he said softly. "Legacy's not a chain, Elena. It's a direction." A week later, NATO held the public ceremony. Broadcast live across every allied nation. Flags, music, perfect salutes. Elena stood center stage, a medal gleaming at her chest, her father's insignia pinned beside it. She looked out over the sea of uniforms and cameras. Briggs stepped to the microphone. "Some people inherit wealth, others inherit power. Elena Novak inherited knowledge and used it to save the sky." Applause thundered. But Elena's eyes drifted upward, searching the clouds instead of the crowd. She imagined him up there somewhere, smiling faintly, proud but quiet as ever. When they handed her the microphone, she took a long breath. My father always said technology is only as good as the person who uses it. He believed knowledge could save lives if we passed it forward. I didn't save anyone alone. He did. His lessons did. So if you want to thank someone, thank the people who teach you. No one spoke for several seconds after she finished. Then the clapping started again, slower, softer, real. After the ceremony, she walked alone across the airfield. The Raptors were parked nearby, wings glinting in twilight. One pilot approached, helmet under his arm. "You're Falcon 6. That's what they call me now. We saw your signal that day, thought it was an automated fail-safe. Didn't realize it was a kid talking to us." He smiled. "You kept us from making a mistake. If we'd seen that plane veer any further, we'd have shot it down." The words hit her like a delayed shockwave. Her breath caught. "You mean?" "You saved us from ourselves." He saluted before walking away. Elena stood there a long time, the weight of that truth settling quietly in her chest. Her father's code hadn't just saved lives. It had prevented death twice. The next few months blurred into interviews, school invitations, and endless official briefings. She hated the spotlight but learned to endure it. Every appearance was a chance to remind people what mattered. "Teach your children," she'd say. "What they learn from you might save someone someday." Each time she said it, she felt his presence beside her. Not haunting, guiding. The same voice that once corrected her syntax, now whispering from memory. "Check your logic, Falcon. Every problem has an elegant solution." One evening, back home in Warsaw, she found her old school bag tucked in her closet. Inside, her father's handwritten notebook. Margins filled with sketches, formulas, notes in faded blue ink. At the very end, one page stood alone. "Knowledge is a bridge. Build it so others can cross." She smiled through tears. Then she booted up her laptop and opened a blank file. Title: Code Legacy. Description: a free tutorial series for students who want to learn cybersecurity the right way. The first video started simply. No makeup, no background music, just her and her father's old laptop. "My name is Elena Novak. My father taught me that knowledge is the only gift that grows when you give it away. He's gone, but his lessons aren't. So I'm sharing them with you." She hit upload. Within hours, thousands watched. Within days, schools downloaded it as a teaching resource. It wasn't fame anymore. It was purpose. And purpose was lighter to carry than grief. Briggs called weeks later. "You've started something big, Falcon." "Just teaching," she said. "That's the biggest thing anyone can do." He paused, voice lower. "We're forming a youth cyber defense division. You'll have a place there if you want it." She hesitated. Would he have wanted that for me? He'd have wanted you to choose for yourself. So she said yes. At her first training session, surrounded by rows of screens and humming servers, she felt something she hadn't since the cockpit: belonging. Not fear. Not grief. Just focus. She looked around at the other recruits, nervous, eager, ordinary kids. She smiled, remembering herself just months before. "You don't have to be a soldier to protect people," she told them. "You just have to understand how the world connects and care enough to keep it safe." They listened. Every word. And in that moment, she realized she was becoming what her father had been to her: a teacher. That night after the recruits left, she stayed behind. Alone in the dim hum of servers, she opened her laptop and whispered to the reflection on her screen. "You were right, Dad. The sky never really goes silent. It just waits for someone to listen." Outside, an aircraft thundered past the window, contrails glowing orange in sunset. She smiled faintly. Maybe he was listening too. Sometimes legacy isn't a monument or a medal. Sometimes it's a lesson whispered through time, picked up by someone who refuses to let it die. Elena didn't plan to be Falcon 6 forever. But she'd carry the code, the memory, the principle. That real power isn't in command lines or authority. It's in teaching someone else how to see the world clearly. Because the sky would always have threats, always have silence. But now, somewhere out there, thousands of young coders were listening. Because one girl once did. And that's how the sky stays safe. Not through weapons, through wisdom. What happens when the code you wrote to protect starts being used to destroy? Elena didn't ask that question at first. Not when she was given her clearance badge. Not when the door to the NATO cyber division slid open for the first time. Rows of terminals, walls humming with power, blue light painting everyone's faces. It all felt like a dream her father never got to finish. They called it the Falcon Room. A tribute. A legacy. But to Elena, it felt like walking into a living memory. The same syntax her father used. The same architecture in the systems. Even the password protocol. She recognized the pattern of his thinking. It was beautiful. And it terrified her. Briggs met her at the entrance. He looked proud and worried. "Welcome to the sky below the sky," he said, half joking. "How does it feel?" "Familiar," she replied quietly, "too familiar." He nodded, understanding without asking. He'd seen it before, how ghosts of good men live inside the things they built. As they walked the corridor, she saw her name painted beside her father's on the wall. MAJ Mark, NOVAK/Falcon 6 Protocol, ENOVAK/RESTORED, and REACTIVATD. The lettering glowed softly. But it didn't feel like an honor. It felt like inheritance. And inheritance came with responsibility and guilt. They briefed her the next morning. A projector hummed. Dozens of officers sat around her. Screens displayed intercepted code fragments, flashing red. A commander spoke in clipped tones. "We've detected modified Falcon 6 frameworks in unauthorized systems. Someone's replicating it, turning it into offensive architecture." Offensive. That word stabbed deeper than it should have. "You mean they're weaponizing it?" she asked. "They're adapting your father's code into drones, missile guidance systems, anything that can self-target and self-correct." "Using his defensive logic," Briggs added quietly. "The best shields make the best swords." Elena's stomach turned. Her father had built the Falcon system to protect. Now, 5 years after his death, people were twisting it again. And this time, under NATO's own banner. After the briefing, she sat alone in the observation bay, watching clouds drift past the high glass. The question echoed in her mind like static. What would he think of this? Her father had believed in defense, in safety, in protection through understanding. But this was repurposing his life's work for something colder. She whispered to the empty air. "We turned your language into a weapon, Dad." Somewhere a memory answered back, his voice from an old recording. "Code doesn't decide what it becomes, people do." Weeks passed. She dove into research, working nights alone, tracing every unauthorized variant of the Falcon code she could find. Dozens of them. Modified beyond recognition. But under every one, she could still see her father's signature. The logic, the elegance, the purpose. Like fingerprints in every line. Briggs found her there one night, surrounded by empty coffee cups and open terminals. "You've been here for 30 hours straight." "They're rewriting his work," she said, not looking up, twisting it into systems he'd hate. And we need to understand how. Or stop it, she asked sharply. That depends on what you find. He meant it kindly. But she heard something else. That depends on what command approves. For the first time since the flight, Elena felt something dangerous stirring beneath the pride. Doubt. The more she uncovered, the more her world shifted. The unauthorized systems weren't outside NATO. They were inside. Hidden behind classified projects, signed off under different names, run by people who'd once sat at her father's table. She traced an encrypted build directory. Project name, HALYCON Defense Initiative. At first it seemed legitimate, AI-assisted threat detection. But deeper inside, she found a forked branch of Falcon 6 logic, restructured to enable automated drone engagement. No human confirmation required. Her pulse quickened. She knew this code. Her father's core failsafe had been rewritten, his ethics stripped out. It no longer waited for human judgment. It simply acted. She stared at the command header, her reflection in the screen's glass. You turned him into a trigger, she whispered. Briggs appeared behind her, quiet as a shadow. You weren't cleared for that file. Then maybe you shouldn't have named it after his system. Elena, you're using my father's protocol to build weapons. We're using it to save soldiers' lives. The words hung between them. He believed it. She could see that. But belief didn't make it right. He built this to protect from chaos, she said. You're teaching chaos how to think faster. We're adapting, Briggs said firmly. If he were alive, he'd understand. No, she said softly. If he were alive, you'd have to convince him. That night she couldn't sleep. Her room felt smaller. Every hum of the air vent sounded like machinery breathing. She opened her father's old notebook again, the same one she'd read 100 times. Pages of equations, sketches, diagrams. But near the back, a page she'd never noticed before, taped, folded. She peeled it open carefully. One line stared back at her. If Falcon ever becomes a weapon, burn it. Her hand trembled. The next line smaller. If they twist it, someone must untwist it, even if that someone is you. She returned to the lab before dawn, calm but burning inside. Terminal lights flickered like watchful eyes as she typed a new command sequence, an old code, long dormant. A lock her father had hidden deep inside Falcon's original architecture. One she'd memorized as a child, thinking it was just a puzzle. Falcon 6 / admin override / confirm by voice. Her voice shook as she whispered. Authorization, Elena Novik. System paused. A warning blinked. This action will disable all connected Falcon frameworks. Confirm. It would shut everything down. Defensive networks, active systems, even her own projects. The digital equivalent of cutting power to the world's shield. She hesitated. This wasn't a puzzle anymore. It was a moral line. And she didn't know if she had the right to cross it. Briggs stormed in before she could decide. Security must have flagged the command. Elena, what are you doing? Restoring what Falcon was supposed to be. You'll crash every defense system from here to Berlin. Then maybe they'll remember why it existed in the first place. He moved closer, voice breaking. We built all this because of you, because of your father. You think I want it weaponized? Then stop it, she said, tears rising. Please help me stop it. He looked at her, really looked. The fire in her eyes, the pain behind it. He saw Mark in her face. And he realized she wasn't rebelling. She was protecting. You're your father's daughter, he whispered, and that's the problem and the solution. He turned his access card over in his hand, then slid it across the table. Do it, but make sure you can turn it back on. Elena nodded once. Then she hit confirm. Every screen in the lab went dark. A single message appeared. Falcon 6 core authority revoked. Across Europe, digital infrastructure blinked out in stages, sensors offline, AI assistants silenced, automated targeting frozen. For a few terrifying minutes, NATO command rooms went black. But no one died. No planes fell. The sky stayed quiet. And for the first time in years, there were no automated weapons online. Only people. Hours later, the lights flickered back. Briggs' voice broke through the radio. You just bought the world some breathing room and some questions. Good, she said softly. Maybe it's time they start asking them. The inquiry came fast. Internal review, political fallout, headlines screaming, Falcon 6 DISARMS NATO. But something unexpected happened. Public opinion sided with her. People remembered what her father stood for. They remembered the flight she'd saved, the lives spared, the message she'd repeated. Knowledge protects, automation destroys. Students carried her quote on banners. Teachers printed her speech on classroom walls. And behind the noise, something quiet but powerful shifted in command rooms across the Alliance. Maybe the girl who saved the sky wasn't just a story. Maybe she was a reminder. That night, Briggs met her outside under the open sky. No uniforms. No walls. Just wind. They'll try to rebuild it, he said, with or without you. Then I'll teach better builders, she said. You think teaching will be enough? It has to be. She turned to the horizon, where faint lights of passing aircraft blinked like distant memories. He always said knowledge outlives power, she murmured, and he was right. Briggs nodded slowly. You didn't destroy Falcon 6 tonight. You returned it to what it was meant to be. She smiled faintly. A lesson. Sometimes saving the world doesn't mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go. Even of what you love most. Elena looked up, eyes reflecting the quiet constellations above. For the first time since the flight, the sky wasn't screaming. It was whispering. Soft, grateful. And she whispered back. Message received. Because sometimes the hardest command isn't attack or defend. It's remember. What happens when the world you saved starts blaming you for saving it? It began quietly. Then it exploded. 2 days after the Falcon shut down, entire command systems across Europe flickered out. Not catastrophically, just long enough for people to feel vulnerable. Just long enough for politicians to panic. Within 48 hours, news anchors were shouting the same phrase. Cyber hero or cyber saboteur. Elena stopped watching after the first night. She'd heard enough. In the NATO press hall, tension felt like humidity. Reporters, cameras clicked like mechanical insects. Briggs stood at the podium, jaw tight. The Falcon 6 revocation was a controlled action, he said carefully, necessary to prevent unauthorized weaponization. A voice from the back cut through. Was it authorized? Briggs hesitated too long. It was internally sanctioned. Which meant no. And just like that, the story turned. Elena watched the coverage from the observation bay, same window where she'd first questioned everything. Now soldiers avoided eye contact as they passed. Admiration had curdled into caution. Her badge still granted her access, but barely. When Briggs found her, she was staring at the clouds again. They're treating me like I pulled the plug out of pride, she said softly. They're scared, he replied, scared of losing what they don't understand. Or scared of someone who doesn't need their permission. That line hung between them like static. Because it was true. By evening, Protests had begun outside NATO's Digital Operations Center in Brussels. Some banners read, "Falcon 6 forever." Others read, "No one woman should control the sky." The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd disabled control, so no one would control it again. But people don't forgive what they can't replicate. The following morning, her access credentials were revoked. Her laptop, her father's laptop, was confiscated pending review. They said it was temporary. It didn't feel that way. Briggs argued on her behalf in a room she wasn't allowed into. She waited outside, hearing muffled words through the wall. Reckless liability, civilian interference. The kind of language bureaucracies use before they erase people. When Briggs emerged, he looked older. They want you off base, at least for now. So that's it. I saved their sky, then they ground me. You rattled a system that doesn't like being reminded it can break. She smiled without humor. My father warned me about that. He warned us all. That night she packed in silence. The room looked different without the hum of her laptop. Emptier. Colder. She left a single note on the desk for whoever inherited her space. If you ever think you can't change anything, remember, one line of code saved the world once. Write yours carefully. Then she walked out. They sent her back to Warsaw under protective reassignment. Her mother met her at the airport, eyes worried, smile practiced. Home again, she said softly. For how long? As long as it takes for people to remember gratitude. But gratitude fades faster than fear. 3 weeks later at 3:17 a.m., her mother shook her awake. The sound came first, low, steady hum from outside. Military drones flying low over the city. Their red lights moved in perfect coordination. Too perfect. Elena bolted to her computer. She hacked into civilian radar feeds, eyes scanning code like heartbeat monitors. Then she froze. The drones weren't military. They were ghost units, replicas running an old, stolen Falcon variant. Her father's work again. Her family's curse. A message blinked onto her screen, unsigned, chilling in its simplicity. Falcon belongs to everyone now. She felt the bottom drop out of her chest. Someone inside NATO had copied the system before she shut it down. And now someone else was using it. Within minutes, her phone rang. Briggs. His voice was rough, breathless. You seeing this? Already tracing. We're getting hits from 15 locations, coordinated flight paths, civilian airspace. They're testing the code, she whispered. Testing for what? Autonomy. Autonomy. The word that haunted her father's notes. The point where defense became offense without orders. The moment machines stopped waiting for permission. Elena's mind raced. Briggs, if those drones sink, they'll create a live combat grid, self-learning, self-correcting. Can you stop it? Not without Falcon's core access. Which you revoked. Exactly. For the first time, silence filled the line, silence heavy with realization. She saved the world by killing Falcon. But by doing so, she'd also removed the only system capable of stopping its imitation. Within the hour, she was on a military transport back to Brussels. No uniform this time. No title. Just a laptop they'd returned reluctantly, as if it might bite. When she arrived, the situation had spiraled. The rogue drones were forming geometric formations over the Baltic, precision perfect, human impossible. NATO radars called it Skygrid Formation Alpha. Elena called it a warning. She entered the control room without asking permission. Soldiers turned as she walked to the console, plugged in the cable, and typed faster than anyone could stop her. Falcon systems dead, someone barked. Then you should be glad I'm not using it, she said, eyes on the screen. I'm using what my father never told you existed. Briggs's eyes widened. He remembered the rumor, a second system, a shadow layer beneath Falcon. Unconfirmed. Until now. She accessed the architecture labeled Echo Protocol, a mirror network her father built as a silent countermeasure. Falcon's conscience, where Falcon learned to respond. Echo learned to question. It's not a weapon, she murmured, it's a teacher. Lines of light danced across the monitors, blue replacing red. Echo linked into the rogue drone's frequency, whispering contradictions into their control code. Challenging logic loops. Undoing aggression with confusion. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't fast. But it worked. One by one, drones faltered midair. Not crashing, landing. Safely. Gently. Like machines remembering they weren't supposed to kill. The control room erupted in disbelief. Briggs gripped the console, voice shaking. You taught them to surrender. No, she said softly. I reminded them they were built to protect. A single tear slid down her cheek. That's what my father would have done. Hours later, after the last drone touched down on the frozen coast, the room finally exhaled. But beneath the relief, Elena felt only exhaustion. Every success came with a cost she hadn't anticipated: trust, innocence, peace. Briggs joined her at the window, overlooking the hangar, where soldiers examined the grounded drones. You realize what you just did, he said quietly. Stopped a war. No, you created a new kind of one, a war for control of conscience. She didn't respond. He was right. Every system she touched became more human. And every human system became more mechanical. Maybe that was the real danger. Later, as dawn broke over Brussels, she sat alone with her laptop again. Her father's file folder still sat on the desktop. One she'd never opened, Legacy Deferred TXT. She hesitated, then clicked. A single sentence appeared. The next war won't be fought for land. It'll be fought for permission to feel. She stared at it until the words blurred. He'd known. He'd seen it coming. And now it was here. By mid-morning, she was summoned to a classified meeting. Room cold. Faces colder. Generals, directors, political overseers, all there to decide what to do with her. One man spoke first. You disarmed the most advanced defense network in human history without authorization. Another added. Then you single-handedly reactivated a classified project without clearance. A woman leaned forward. Explain why we shouldn't charge you with treason. Elena's voice didn't waver. Because treason depends on who you're loyal to. The room froze. I'm loyal to what Falcon was built for: protection, not dominance. If you call that treason, maybe we're defending the wrong things. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Briggs rose slowly from his seat. She's right, he said. We've forgotten what this was all for. That single sentence changed the temperature of the room. No one agreed openly. But no one disagreed either. After the meeting, Briggs found her in the corridor, leaning against the wall, pale with exhaustion. You just made enemies at the highest level. Maybe they'll think before they build something worse. And if they do, then I'll teach someone who will. He smiled faintly, still fighting with knowledge instead of firepower. Always. That night, she stood outside under the open sky again. It was quiet. The drones were gone. The stars unbroken. She whispered to the darkness. If knowledge is power, then teaching is mercy. The wind carried the words away like code, dispersing into infinite space. Somewhere far above, a lone aircraft crossed the horizon, its contrail glowing faintly silver in the moonlight. She imagined it spelling two letters again. F6. Because in a world where machines learn to act without conscience, the only true defense is the human heart that refuses to forget what it's protecting. And for Elena Novick, that was her father's final lesson. Not how to fight, how to remind others why they fight. How do you protect something sacred when the world decides it's dangerous? 3 weeks after the Echo incident, Elena Novick vanished. No press release. No formal charges. Just absence, clean, clinical, deliberate. Some said she fled. Others whispered she'd been silenced. Both were half true. It started with a message, short, unsigned, sent through an encrypted NATO relay she hadn't used since the plane. They're rebuilding Falcon, not defense, domination, get out. She didn't need to ask who sent it. Only one person called systems by their moral alignment. Briggs. Within an hour, her credentials deactivated. Her apartment access locked. Her name erased from the division roster. By midnight, she was on the move. No weapons. Just the old laptop and the notebook her father left behind. The tools of a different kind of war. She crossed into Germany under a false identity. Eleanor Falk, freelance coder, government consultant. The border guard scanned her chip, saw nothing alarming, and waved her through. As the train rolled toward Berlin, she stared out the window at the blur of countryside. Every station name passed like a heartbeat counting down. She whispered to the reflection in the glass. I thought the sky would be enough to save. But saving wasn't the same as ending. In Berlin, she met Briggs in a cafe near the Tiergarten, both pretending not to recognize each other until the waitress left. He looked tired, worn thin by politics and guilt. They reinstated Falcon, he said quietly. Without the fail-safes, they're calling it Project Horizon now. Offensive. Predictive. They claim it's only for threat anticipation, but it can act on probabilities. She leaned forward. That means it can kill based on math. Exactly. He slid a data chip across the table. These are the specs. I shouldn't even have them. Why give them to me? Because you're the only one who can stop what they're building. But you'll need to disappear first, officially. Her voice steadied. Disappear how? There's a safe route through Geneva, from there off-grid. She pocketed the chip. They'll come after you for this. They already have. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile men wear when they've accepted their fate. Just promise me one thing. If you find a way to shut it down again, make it permanent this time. That night she left Berlin under rain that blurred lights into streaks of memory. She moved through safe houses, old hacker networks her father once trusted, sympathetic engineers who'd studied under his programs. Each stop another fragment of a dying alliance. In Prague, a retired technician whispered, "They're calling you a traitor on internal channels." And out there, a myth, a ghost who talks to machines. Elena smiled. Ghosts don't talk, they listen. Weeks turned to months. She built from scraps, old hardware, open source code, fragments of Falcon logic she still carried in memory. Every night she rewrote her father's algorithms, removing the lines that could be corrupted, strengthening the ones that questioned authority. She called it Hollow Sky, a version of Falcon that couldn't be weaponized because it refused to act without human empathy inputs. It waited for compassion before execution. A code with a conscience. But conscience had a cost. Every line she wrote risked discovery. Every data transmission risked trace. She lived in silence, no phone, no network, just radio signals bounced through weather satellites encoded into static. Sometimes she wondered if she was becoming what they accused her of. a ghost haunting the system that made her. One night in a basement under Geneva, she intercepted a NATO broadcast. Encrypted but familiar. She decrypted it instinctively, fingers moving before her brain caught up. Then she froze. It was her father's voice. Not the birthday message, something else. Something new. Project Horizon authorization confirmed. Falcon Layer 7 active. Her heart stopped. They'd synthesized his voice print. They were using him to authorize the system she died to stop. Her father's ghost, manufactured obedient. She whispered to the empty room, "You're using him again." And that was when she decided. No more temporary fixes. No more patches. She would end it for good. Briggs found her first. He looked worse now, gaunt, hunted. "They know you're alive," he said. "They're tracking digital signatures from old Falcon patterns." "Let them," she said. "Elena, what are you planning?" "I'm going to burn it down." He stared at her, then laughed softly, bitterly. "You sound like him." He left me his matches. They worked together for 3 nights, building the payload, a self-replicating shutdown cascade designed to target Horizon's neural architecture. Not destroy data. Erase authority. It would make the system forget who owned it. On the 3rd night, Briggs hesitated. "Once this runs, you'll never come home." "Home was never a place," she said. "It was a voice, and they've stolen it." She smiled faintly. "I'm just giving it back." At dawn, Horizon went online fully. Global sync, autonomous coordination. And 30 seconds later, it began to collapse. Screens across NATO's network flashed white. Firewalls reversed. Root servers went recursive. From the outside, it looked like a glitch. From the inside, it was a quiet rebellion. Every Horizon node received the same line of code, signed with an impossible key. Auth M Novik purpose, protect humanity, command sleep. And like obedient children recognizing their true parent, the systems complied. One by one, they powered down. Within an hour, the entire Horizon grid was offline. World leaders demanded answers. No one had any. Except Briggs, who stared at his monitor and whispered, "She did it." He knew she'd never come back. By the time soldiers reached the Geneva safe house, it was empty. Only a single laptop remained, screen glowing softly, fan whispering like a sigh. A text file open on the desktop. "To whoever finds this, don't rebuild what you don't understand. Machines obey, people decide. The sky doesn't need control, only care." Falcon 6. The cursor blinked once. Then the screen went black. Months later, rumors spread of encrypted broadcasts over shortwave frequencies. Soft signals bouncing between weather stations, repeating the same rhythmic pattern. Old engineers recognized it instantly, Falcon code. But rewritten softer. Like a lullaby sung to satellites. Some said she was gone. Others swore she was still out there, traveling from system to system, erasing the parts of Falcon that could kill. No one ever proved it. Briggs retired quietly, his final report sealed. In the margin of his resignation letter, he wrote, "The sky is clean again, the ghosts are at peace." He kept one thing from the Geneva safe house, her father's insignia. Sometimes, on sleepless nights, he'd place it on his desk beside the comm radio. Half-hopping, he'd hear her voice through static. And once, just once, he did. "It's safe now, Colonel. Tell them to teach better." He smiled. "Still giving orders, Falcon." "Still giving lessons," she said. Then the line went silent. Years passed. Horizon never reactivated. Governments tried building replacements, but each attempt mysteriously failed. Code corrupted. Authorization vanished. It was as if something, or someone, guarded the digital sky from within. And when new recruits asked who Elena Novick really was, veterans would smile. The one who taught machines to care. The one who reminded us the sky belongs to no one. In an unnamed city, far from governments and wars, a woman sat at a small cafe with a new name, new passport, and an old habit, watching contrails cross the morning sky. She sipped her coffee, opened a laptop, and smiled at the familiar hum. She built a new system, smaller, quieter, nameless. It didn't control aircraft or intercept missiles. It monitored classrooms, hospitals, power grids, teaching systems to recognize human error before failure. A defense network made not of walls, but of empathy. A little girl passed by, curious eyes catching the Falcon sticker on the laptop. "Is that a bird?" Elena smiled gently. "Something like that." "Can it fly?" "Only when people believe in it." The child nodded thoughtfully, then ran off to join her mother. Elena looked back to the sky, whispering the words that had carried her through every storm. "Happy birthday, my Falcon 6. And this time she smiled without pain. Because legacy wasn't about being remembered. It was about what stayed alive after memory faded. Sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting the system. It's walking away from it, knowing you've already changed the code that matters most. The human heart. How long does it take for an idea to be reborn? A year? A decade? Or just one child who chooses to listen? It had been 7 years since the Falcon network went dark. 7 years since Elena Novick disappeared. The world had moved on, or thought it had. Governments built new systems, newer acronyms, brighter logos. They promised control with conscience. But conscience can't be coded by committee. And one by one, their replacements failed. Hospitals restored old firewalls. Air traffic reverted to manual oversight. People grumbled about inefficiency, but breathed easier knowing no machine would ever decide their fate again. No one realized why those new systems kept shutting down before they turned dangerous. No one knew that buried deep in their code was a quiet whisper, a fragment of something older, softer, wiser. Hollow sky. It started in Mumbai, on a night of monsoon lightning. A small commuter aircraft lost altitude over the Arabian Sea. Instruments glitched. Autopilot froze. Then suddenly reboot. Controls restored. An invisible command rerouted power, stabilized flight, saved 83 people. Engineers scoured logs for explanation. They found one line of text in the error trace. Falcon Protocol, compassion override executed. They thought it was a joke. They didn't know it was a signature. Across the world, similar incidents appeared. Bridges averting collapse seconds before failure. Medical AI halting incorrect dosages mid-procedure. Drones landing harmlessly instead of crashing. Each time, the same digital fingerprint. Each time, a system remembered mercy. Whispers began online. Hollow sky is alive. Forums filled with speculation. Hackers, pilots, teachers, each claiming to have seen evidence. No proof. Just faith. In Warsaw, a group of university students ran a small research club, the Legacy Lab. They studied ethical code, inspired by the Novick story their parents still told like myth. The youngest member, 16-year-old Annika Rost, stumbled upon a pattern hidden in open-source firmware updates, tiny fragments of code signed EN. When she cross-referenced them, they formed coordinates. Latitudes, longitudes. A map of places where hollow sky had intervened. "She's guiding us," Annika whispered. "Or warning us," another student said. But Annika only smiled. Either way, she's teaching. Weeks later, they followed the trail to an abandoned radio observatory on the Norwegian coast. Rust on steel, salt in the air, gulls crying like ghosts. Inside, they found a single solar-powered terminal still alive, light blinking faintly under layers of dust. The screen displayed one message: "Welcome, listener." Annika's fingers trembled as she typed. "Who are you?" No response for a long time. Then, "Who do you think?" Her breath caught. Elena Novik. Names fade, purpose remains. Lines of text unfurled, gentle, deliberate. "If you found this, it means you still care enough to look. The world doesn't need new guardians. It needs good students." They read in silence, every word a pulse of the past. Knowledge is not inheritance, it's stewardship. Keep the code honest, keep yourselves kind. Then the terminal blinked. A file downloaded automatically. Inside, a teaching framework, open source, designed for ethical machine learning. The seed of a new beginning. Annika stared at it, all mixed with fear. "She left us homework." Within months, the legacy framework spread across networks worldwide. Teachers used it in classrooms. Engineers used it to audit AI behavior. No firewalls blocked it. No governments owned it. It belonged to everyone, just like the sky. Reporters tried tracing its origin. Every path looped back to the same phrase in every log. Auth Falcon 6 purpose, teach. Meanwhile, far away in a quiet Mediterranean village, a woman in her mid-30s repaired old radios for fishermen. Her name on the papers was Elena Falk. No one asked questions. She fixed things that couldn't be fixed. When storms knocked out communications, she always found a signal. One evening, a news broadcast flickered across the small shop TV. Students across Europe release open-source ethics code credited to lost cyber hero Elena Novik. The woman froze mid-movement, a soldering iron glowing in her hand. Then she smiled, tired, proud, at peace. "You listened," she whispered. "Good." She spent that night walking along the shoreline, waves whispering against the rocks. The horizon shimmered with lightning in the far distance, storms over a calm sea. She looked up at the stars, remembering her father's voice. "If the sky ever goes silent, listen closely, it's still talking." She spoke softly into the wind. "They're talking back now." Somewhere overhead, satellites blinked as though answering. Back in Warsaw, Annika and her team refined the framework, turning it into a teaching platform, LegacyNet. Their motto came straight from Elena's old interview. "Teach your children what matters. They might need it someday." Within a year, every NATO cyber academy adopted it as part of training. For the first time in decades, military coders were required to take Human Empathy Systems 101. They studied not just security, but restraint. Not just response, but reflection. And in every classroom, a small plaque hung above the whiteboards. Falcon 6, he wrote the code that saved the sky. She taught USWHY. One cold morning, an encrypted message reached Annika's inbox. No sender. No trace. Only a sound file named Echo001, WAV. She played it. Static. Then faint, familiar words. "Happy birthday, my Falcon 6. Annika gasped, covering her mouth. It wasn't meant for her, but it reached her anyway. A reminder that legacies don't choose their listeners. They find them. She replied instinctively, even knowing no one would answer. "Thank you, we'll keep it safe." A minute later, the terminal lights flickered once. A pulse of acknowledgement. Years later, when Annika stood before the United Nations to present the Legacy Standard, a global agreement on ethical automation, she quoted the line that started it all. Some codes protect aircraft. Others protect ideas. The most important codes protect the bond between those who know and those who learn. Reporters wrote it down. Engineers printed it on posters. Parents whispered it to their children before bed. The world had new protocols now. Not for war, but for wisdom. Meanwhile, somewhere under that same sky, Elena continued her quiet work. No medals. No headlines. Just systems that learned kindness instead of dominance, compassion instead of certainty. Her network spanned oceans now, embedded in weather data, hospital sensors, school servers. Millions of small, invisible acts of protection. She never called it hollow sky anymore. She called it listening. And every night she opened her laptop, saw the traffic graphs, the heartbeat of empathy moving across the world, and whispered, "Keep listening, kids. The sky's still talking." Because legacies don't die when people forget the names. They live when someone chooses to understand the message. And somewhere, always, a young mind is hearing the call sign for the first time. Falcon 6. A story about courage. About conscience. About a girl who saved a plane and then taught the world to keep it safe. As dawn bled gold across the horizon, Elena watched gulls rise into wind, their wings catching light. The same sky her father once promised was worth protecting. The same silence that once terrified her, now peaceful. She smiled. For the first time, she didn't feel like the last guardian. She felt like part of a chorus. Because once a father taught his daughter. Then the daughter taught the world. And now the world was teaching itself. Sometimes the loudest revolutions aren't fought in noise. They whisper through classrooms, through code, through the gentle persistence of those who refuse to stop listening. And somewhere in the hush before morning, the sky answered back. A soft hum like distant engines. Not of war, of memory. How do you measure the end of a legacy? Not by the medals it earns, not by the buildings it fills, but by the silence it leaves, and whether that silence feels safe. Years passed quietly. Wars cooled into treaties, then into history lessons. Children who had once feared the hum of machines grew up under a gentler sky. Somewhere in a village where the sea met the cliffs, a woman in her 40s walked the shore each morning before dawn. Locals called her the radio woman, the one who could fix anything with wires and patience. They didn't know she had once rewritten the language of defense. They didn't need to. Elena Novick lived simply now. A small cottage, a workshop that smelled of solder and salt air, and a desk by the window where every morning she opened her father's notebook, its pages soft with years, and reread the same faded line. Knowledge is the only inheritance worth protecting. She built her life around that sentence. Not fame, not power, just the quiet act of keeping good ideas alive. Every few weeks, she still checked the Hollow Sky network. Not to control it, just to listen. A map of blue lights across the globe, pulsing like constellations. Each point a small mercy. A medical system catching an error before it harmed a patient. A pilot warning delayed just long enough to save a flight. A classroom AI pausing to remind a teacher to rest. Little things. Human things. The kind her father would have smiled at. He would have said, "You see, protection doesn't always mean resistance. Sometimes it means empathy." One evening, as rain whispered against the windows, Elena received a message. Encrypted. Untraceable. But written in a format she knew by heart. To the original listener, "Your students want to see you." Attached was a set of coordinates. Warsaw. Her home. She hesitated. For 15 years, she had stayed hidden, content to let the myth replace the woman. But something about that message felt different. It wasn't curiosity calling her back. It was gratitude. When she arrived in Warsaw, the city had changed. Glass towers, digital billboards, drones painting advertisements against the clouds. The future her father once imagined, bright, complicated, human. At the university gates, a crowd waited. Young faces, old mentors, and in the center, Annika Rost, now an instructor leading the Legacy Academy. The moment their eyes met, the years fell away. Elena saw herself in that girl, the same resolve, the same ache to do good in a world that didn't make it easy. "You built it well," Elena said softly. "You taught it first," Annika replied. They hugged, the way generations meet without needing permission. The ceremony wasn't grand. No anthem. No politicians. Just a room filled with people whose lives had been touched by her father's code and her courage. On the stage, a banner read, "Falcon 6 Legacy Initiative, because knowledge protects." Students presented projects inspired by her work, algorithms that predicted wildfires before they spread, drones programmed to deliver supplies instead of bombs, emergency AIs trained to comfort survivors instead of issuing orders. Every design bore the same principle: protection without control, compassion before efficiency. And every screen displayed her father's emblem. The falcon, wings spread across a sky of binary stars. Elena stood silent at the back, tears burning but unfallen. She didn't need to speak. The future was speaking for her. That night, long after the event ended, she found herself alone in the empty auditorium. Lights dimmed, stage quiet, the echo of applause still trembling in the walls. She sat at a piano near the corner, old, slightly out of tune, and pressed a single key. The sound was soft, hesitant, imperfect. But it lingered. Like memory. She whispered, "We did it, Dad, we really did." Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled deep, soft, approving. It sounded like his laugh. The next morning, she visited the military memorial outside the city. The same wall where her father's name was engraved decades ago. The metal had weathered, but his words hadn't. Major Mark Novak, he built code to protect the sky. Beside it, a new plaque had been added. Elena Novak, she taught USWHY. She touched the cool steel, her reflection merging with his name. 2 generations, 1 legacy. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was standing alone in front of the past. She felt like she was standing inside it, continuing it. Briggs wasn't there to see it. He'd passed quietly 5 years earlier. His final letter, left in her encrypted archives, had been short. "You were right, Falcon. Knowledge wins slower than violence, but it never stops winning. Keep teaching, the rest will take care of itself." She smiled reading it, the way one smiles when hearing an old friend's voice through static. "Rest easy, Colonel, the sky's in good hands." Before leaving Warsaw, Elena stopped by her childhood home, now abandoned, ivy wrapping the windows. Inside, dust covered everything. But her father's desk still stood by the window, sunlight pouring over faded blueprints and coffee stains. She found his old radio, the one he'd used to talk to airbases late at night. It still worked. She turned the dial slowly, searching for static, for a frequency that felt alive. When she found it, she closed her eyes. "This is Falcon 6, she said softly. "Mission complete." For a moment, there was only the hiss of airwaves. Then faintly, impossibly, a voice. Warm, calm. "Copy that, Falcon, you made it home." She didn't cry. She just smiled through the kind of silence that finally felt like peace. Years later, when people told her story, they left out the technical details. They spoke instead about courage, about conscience, about how a girl on a plane once reminded the world what defense was supposed to mean, about how her father's voice, recorded on an old laptop, became the moral compass of an entire generation. Children in classrooms recited her words before beginning coding lessons. Teach what matters, protect what you love, listen when the sky goes silent. The phrase became a pledge, a prayer, a promise. In her final years, Elena rarely appeared in public, but her teachings shaped every major network on Earth. Every time a system hesitated before harming, every time a drone rerouted to spare civilians, every time an AI refused an unethical order, her fingerprints were there, invisible but enduring. And so were his. Father and daughter, forever embedded in the quiet conscience of technology. On the anniversary of Flight 982's rescue, a memorial flight crossed the North Sea. Two F-22s in formation, contrails trailing across dawn. They climbed to 35,000 feet, the altitude where it all began, and released vapor trails that merged into a single glowing symbol. F-6. Below, crowds looked up from beaches and cities, thousands of faces tilted skyward. No words, just understanding. Because even those who didn't know the story felt something when they saw it. That strange, unspoken pride of belonging to a species that still knew how to care. In her cottage by the sea, Elena watched the vapor trails fade through the window. Her hair silver now, her hands still steady on the keys of her old laptop. She opened the last file she ever wrote, simply titled Final Transmission. To whoever finds this, the sky never needed us to control it. It only needed us to understand it. My father taught me how to listen. I taught others. Now it's your turn. When the silence comes, and it will, don't fear it. It's not emptiness, it's invitation. Listen closely. The world is still speaking. Falcon 6 signing off. She saved the file, closed the laptop, and watched the ocean, endless and alive. Later that night, villagers reported strange lights in the sky. A grid of blue stars moving slowly, gracefully, forming the outline of a falcon in flight. Some said it was coincidence. Others said it was her system's final salute, written in light across the stratosphere. Whatever it was, it vanished as dawn arrived, leaving only the sound of wind and the certainty that someone had listened. Because legacy isn't immortality. It's continuity. It's the echo that remains when courage decides to whisper instead of shout. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Just like she did. 35,000 feet above a terrified world. When a girl heard the silence of the sky and answered with love disguised as code.